Tonight, another blow for Keir Starmer. He was already braced for what could be a disastrous set of local election results in May. Now plans to cancel elections in 30 areas have been scrapped. An extra 4.5 million people will get to vote. Nigel Farage's Reform UK were behind the legal challenge against the delays. Tonight, they're jubilant. I'll be joined live by Zia Yusuf, their head of policy. Also tonight, the Cabinet Office is investigating this Cabinet Office minister over claims a Labour think tank was part of an alleged smear campaign against journalists. We'll take you through all the details. Plus, the Prime Minister's got chatbots like Elon Musk in his sights as he announces plans for new online safety rules. And after Cherie Blair says Tony made a better politician than husband, we'll look at what other prime ministerial spouses have said about their other halves. James Starkie and Polly Mackenzie will be my happy couple for the next hour. It's Monday, I'm Ali Fortescue live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Politics Hub. Great to be back with you. Well, Parliament is in recess, as you might well know at the moment, but the big political stories keep coming. Today, another climb down from the government. For those who are counting, this is the 15th U-turn. Elections in 30 councils that were delayed are now going ahead. Those 4.5 million people will be voting. A climb down that will see the government, the taxpayer, paying Reform UK's legal costs, and potentially an even tougher set of local elections for Keir Starmer. And I should say, the Tories too, potentially in May. As a senior Labour figure put it to me, everyone is going to let Keir muddle through until May. What happens next may now be even harder to spin. With all the details, here is our political correspondent, Maria Aurora.
Hello, everybody. Victory for Reform UK as the government U-turns on its plans to cancel local elections in 30 areas of England.
Well, it was extraordinary. I mean, last year we saw cancellations of elections without any real exceptional reason. This year, up to 30 councils, 4.6 million people denied the vote. They've caved, they've collapsed. It's a victory for reform, but more importantly, it's a victory for democracy in this country.
A letter Nigel Farage posted on social media says Steve Reid, the cabinet minister responsible, has decided to withdraw his decision to postpone the elections because of new legal advice. And the government has agreed to pay Reform's legal fees, something Sky News understands to be a six-figure sum. Greeting the King of Jordan, Starmer's diplomatic efforts overshadowed by domestic difficulties.
Why did you try and stop people voting, Mr. Starmer? Did you think you would get away with it, Prime Minister?
Now, over 4.5 million extra people will be voting in May in these councils in England, something local campaigners have not been prepared for and will have to organise with little warning. The makeup of these 30 councils varies, but other parties look set to benefit from this U-turn.
What's interesting about these 30 areas is that all but 9 of them were Labour-held councils, but they represent a huge number of different contests. So we have some situations where there are traditional Conservative Labour fights, such as around Lincoln, for instance. We have others where the Greens will be looking to pick up, such as Hastings and Suffolk. Throughout all of those, of course, Reform UK will be looking to come through really and make a big punch in many of those councils. So we could see a very different constellation of colours in terms of who leads those councils post-May.
And it's not only Reform hailing this decision as a triumph for voters.
I would like to say that is another embarrassing U-turn by the government. The Liberal Democrats have fought tooth and nail to get this stitch-up overturned. It's something we've been chasing both nationally and locally. And what's very important right now is to make sure the government does not have the power to do this again.
After new legal advice just 3 days before they were due to fight this decision in court, government lawyers advised ministers in this department that cancelling those local elections would be illegal. It's another humiliating U-turn for the government, just hours after Keir Starmer promised no more U-turns. Now, opposition parties are celebrating this U-turn as a victory for democracy, but it is Reform UK that ultimately forced the government to change course with its legal action. And with more councils and council seats up for grabs in May than first thought, Keir Starmer now has even more to lose.
Nobody in their right mind would say that's OK.
A government changing its mind for the 15th time, this embattled Prime Minister has decided this was a fight he could not win. But every time he changes his mind, opposition parties seize on this weakness. Hardly a PM who can afford yet another blow to his authority. Mari Aurora, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, as you can see, Maury joins us now in the studio. I should also say we're joined by Rob Ford, who's a Professor of Political Science at the University of Manchester. Thanks for joining us. And we also have our duo for the evening, former Home Office Advisor James Starkie and former Director of Policy for the Lib Dems, Polly Mackenzie. Thank you all for being with us. There's lots to talk about. Let's start with our duo for this evening. James, what did you make of the decision to uncancel? I mean, how damaging do you think this is for Keir Starmer, the decision to uncancel those 30 local elections?
I mean, it's hard to keep up with the damaging decision. Yes, very damaging. I think, to me, though, the most worrying thing, comms-wise, is terrible. Hands a massive victory to Farage. Farage can be gloating about this all day. But honestly, having worked in a couple of departments, I question just the competence of this. So they would, when the government made the decision to cancel those elections, whatever your view of those, and that's been challenged, I thought it was a really terrible look for the government. They would have asked for and they would have received legal advice. The minister would have had to have been told you're acting within the law. And because if they're told they're not, they have to seek exemptions, etc. We would know about that. So you would assume they were told by the government legal service. The government has its own legal department called the Government Legal Service. They were told what you're doing is within the law. We're now led to believe that within the past few days, before a court challenge, that legal advice has changed. We're in recess, so we can't have an urgent question in Parliament. There might be one when we get back next week. But I'm really interested to know and see side by side those two pieces of legal advice. Because for me, having experience of government, I can't really understand what's materially changed legally from the original advice to this. It speaks of an incompetent government.
Polly, what do you think?
So the reason that they didn't cancel these elections, they offered councils the opportunity to cancel the elections, which is kind of slightly different.
You just seen that was
no,
legal.
Indeed. You're still right. I'm just thinking about the kind of policy implications of it. Because they are undergoing a major reform to merge councils in order to drive through cost efficiencies. And they're also trying to drive up house building. And councils are responsible for local plans. And so trying to do elections and big reforms of, electing people to councils that are about to be abolished, for example, and then doing house building all at once, bit of a nightmare for local government. So I think the implications of this, which, as James says, is really messy, is that the reform and the house building are going to get affected because now the councils are in the worst possible situation, which is having to stand up elections, which is quite a lot of work, why they were offered the opportunity to cancel them, basically incredibly short notice.
Right, let's bring in Rob Ford, shall we? Rob, you know a lot about this. What will this now mean? Obviously, local elections are quite often tricky for the incumbents. Who's going to benefit from this? Because Reform seem to think it's them.
Well, I do think that Reform will definitely be the biggest winners from this change. When you look at the areas that were cancelled and have now been uncancelled, it includes lots of rural and semi-rural chunks of eastern England, places like Suffolk and Norfolk, where we would expect Reform to do very well. They were the largest party by seats in last year's local elections. As things stand in the polls, with a very fragmented context, they're the Snow White, with all the other parties being the Seven Dwarves. And because it's a first-past-the-post electoral system, if you're the biggest, you get the most seats. So they stand to do very, very well out of this decision. And also from Labour's perspective, a lot of these councils were Labour controlled in some way or another. It's kind of a worst case scenario to have an election cancelled and then uncancelled at very short notice. You've got no time to prepare, no time to campaign, no time to organise. All of the advantages of incumbency get eroded in this scenario.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? It's also, there's kind of practicalities, right? Opening actual places for people to be able to vote. Someone was telling me, about printing for ballots and things. So this is actually quite a big practical thing on the ground, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. So it's a big headache for the councils at an organisational level, because all of a sudden they've got to scramble to organise the polling stations, to organise the ballot papers, to organise all the logistics of an election on a drastically accelerated timetable. So, and as has been mentioned, this is all happening when they're in the middle of a major reorganisation. So it would be a big load on them and a big headache for all of those councils. It's also an issue for the parties who are trying to fight these elections, because they have spent most of the last few months thinking that they didn't need to fight in these particular areas, and they've been devoting their resources elsewhere. Now all of a sudden they've got to tear up their election maps, their targeting plans, and start from scratch with very little time left. That's bad news generally for incumbent parties, because often they have the advantages of incumbency. It's good news for insurgent parties like Reform, like the Greens, who now face a more level playing field when fighting to take those seats.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Greens quickly? You mentioned them there, how they could do from this.
Well, yes, I mean, that they aren't likely to gain as many seats as Reform. I mean, the Greens are currently polling sort of mid-high teens, and Reform are sort of towards 30%. A lot of the terrain we're talking about here is probably more Reform-friendly than Green-friendly. But the thing about the Green vote is it tends to concentrate quite heavily in groups, in demographics in the country that tend to cluster together. So in lots of these areas, you're going to have 1, 2, 3 wards that have got like a big graduate population or a big ethnic minority population, big student population, and the Greens will be in the running in some of those seats, looking to ride the momentum that they've been showing in the polls all year. And again, it's going to be difficult for the incumbents in those areas because they don't have the time to prepare a defence that they weren't expecting to have to make.
Mari, let's bring you back in. I mean, May just comes up the whole time when I talk to ministers and MPs as this kind of flashpoint, but it could be more than that. It could be like, you know, big bang. I'm mixing my metaphors here. It could be like a big bang moment. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the difficulty is that May was already looking pretty difficult and challenging for the Prime Minister. And now you essentially have more councils and more seats up for grabs, which means the PM now has even more to lose. And I think that if you speak to Labour MPs, they're already expecting a bit of a bloodbath as it is, and this is not going to improve that scenario. It's also important to remember, let's just think of the optics of this. So, first of all, you've had months and months and months of opposition parties calling you undemocratic for counselling people's local elections for, as far as they're concerned, an illegitimate way of doing that. You've now been proven wrong legally, and actually you've been proven that what you were trying to do was illegal when you are run by a lawyer who says everything's always about doing things by the book and respecting the law. Add on top of that the fact that you now have to have a Labour government giving taxpayer money to Reform UK, their opposition party that they are the most afraid of and they are the most alive to in terms of that threat, having to hand cash over to Reform. Now, sources tell us at Sky News that money's going to be around 6 figures. It's not going to be a fiver. So you combine all that together and it makes Labour look unable to regain control over an already challenging and messy premiership for Keir Starmer. And I think the problem is the combination of all those things together are incredibly damaging and are going to frustrate Labour foot soldiers, councillors, campaigning now out of the blue with very little notice, who are going to be pointing at Keir Starmer and saying, hold on a second, why are we in this position?
I should say, you know, we did give a government minister the opportunity to come on the show, and we will be speaking to a Labour MP shortly. But James, I could see you nodding there to what Mari was saying. Yeah,
I mean, I think Mari made some excellent points. It's another one with Keir Starmer as well. It kind of goes against the grain with him. His whole selling point when he came in was, oh, look at the Tories, they're in chaos. I'm quite boring, but I follow process. And what have we seen? We've seen with Mandelson, process not followed. You know, we've seen when we heard the issues around the peerage with the Labour peer, Lord Doyle, who conducted the investigation into that, a communications director, apparently, according to Downing Street, not process. And again, we've got a lawyer presiding over a process where it turns out the thing they're trying to do is illegal.
I think we should just walk back the language of that a tiny bit. I mean, it looks terrible exactly the way you've described. We haven't seen the legal advice. Legal advice is always a balance. They never say, definitely fine or definitely illegal.
No, but they haven't even gone to court.
No, indeed. If it had gone to court, a court might have ruled that it was illegal, and then that would be accurate language. They have got some new legal advice which changes, from them thinking that they had a 90% chance of winning, an 80%. We don't. Again, maybe the public should know. Maybe they should be asked to publish their legal advice. That's always controversial. To say they definitely were trying to do something illegal.
I didn't say that.
That's just not how. Both of you used the word illegal.
No, yeah, of course.
The perception is terrible. I completely agree. But just we should be, I think, fastidious about the fact that they thought something was probably fine. You can never know unless it's been judicially reviewed. They now think it isn't worth the risk of a judicial challenge. Again, that doesn't mean it was definitely illegal. It's only when you've had a court ruling that you can make that assessment.
Hang on. We have a Prime Minister who's casting around allegations last week. He goes to the Munich Security Conference.
I'm not defending the Prime Minister.
And he says there's two parties that are in hot to Putin, through no major evidence. And then we wake up 4 days later and it turns out it's having to pull a legal case. They won't even go to court for something that they've spent months defending. I think the public will look at this and say, this is literally why we elected you. You're a lawyer. We literally elected you to not have things like this.
Because they were so sick of the Conservative Party, actually.
But they wanted change.
Anyone else
they wanted something different, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We will come back to this and lots more. Thank you both. We will come back to you. Thank you, Maury. Thank you very much, Rob Ford, as well. You are watching The Politics Hub. Coming up, Reform UK's Head of Policy, Zia Yusuf, will be us very shortly. Plus, the Prime Minister confirms that the Cabinet Office is investigating a Cabinet Office Minister. We'll explain what's going on.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching The Wrap. Every night of the week, we will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
Just cannot stand.
Stupid thing to do.
He did know what he was doing. You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way. Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Now, Keir Starmer has confirmed today that the Cabinet Office is investigating a Cabinet Office minister. Yes, you heard that right. Josh Simons, I should say, is the minister in question. He used to head up a think tank called Labour Together. It's claimed he commissioned a report that investigated the background of a journalist and led to accusations that it was part of a smear campaign against the media. Well, for more on this, I've been speaking to our political correspondent, Alex Rogers. Right, Alex, a lot of people probably won't have heard of Labour Together, but I think it's hard to think of a think tank that has more influence and power in this country. Can you just tell us a bit about what it actually does?
Yeah, as you say, Ali, this is a highly influential internal Labour think tank that was set up by Labour figures many years ago, but Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's now departed Chief of Staff, he led it for a number of years. And really, what he did with it was he helped propel Sir Keir Starmer to Downing Street, but before that, he really tried to reshape the Labour Party's identity following the 2019 general election defeat, which Morgan McSweeney and others close to him blamed on the left. So it was really a vehicle for crushing the left and propelling a more moderate figure like Sir Keir Starmer at the height of the Labour Party.
So, Keir Starmer might not have even been Prime Minister, but tell us a bit about what these actual allegations now are.
So the allegations are that when Morgan McSweeney stood down and Josh Simons, the Labour MP for Makerfield and now a Cabinet Office Minister, took over.
I should quickly say, people will probably recognise him because he has been on this show a lot of times and he's now a Cabinet Office Minister.
Yeah, he's quite an outspoken MP. He's been on our show many times, as you say. But yes, he's in hot water because the allegations are that he commissioned a PR firm called APCO to investigate the backgrounds and motivations of two political journalists at the Sunday Times. And what the Sunday Times had done is they'd reported that Labour Together had failed to declare more than £700,000 in donations. So APCO looked into the backgrounds of these two journalists and came up with some information that the newspaper says is completely false, that they had links with Russia or were maybe even relying on emails hacked by the Kremlin. So there's a lot of anger now that Labour Together are kind of conducting a smear campaign against two leading political journalists.
Where does this go from here?
So Keir Starmer has said that the Cabinet Office is investigating this investigation by APCO to establish the facts. Josh Simons has previously said it was nonsense, but has also admitted that APCO went beyond its brief. The Lib Dems are calling for Josh Simons to stand down as a Cabinet Office Minister while the Cabinet Office carries out this investigation to avoid any kind of conflict of interest, but it doesn't look like he'll be doing that. And the Prime Minister's official spokesperson said that Keir Starmer does still retain full confidence in Josh Simons.
OK, Alex, thanks so much for explaining all of that for us. Well, I should say that Labour Together's present chief exec says it aspires to the highest standards of probity at all times, while an APCO spokesperson told us they are deeply committed to upholding its values and standards as an organisation and are undertaking a detailed internal review of the project. We can speak now to Labour MP Karl Turner, who I'm pleased to say joins us. What was your reaction, firstly, to the story that we can I start, if you don't mind, on the local elections, actually, because this is a story that we led on today. So local elections are now not being cancelled in 30 local authorities. Could I just get your reaction to that first, please?
Well, look, it's clearly a misstep to having ever considered cancelling the elections. That's the reality. But I think it's another example of the Prime Minister relying on advice which has not been very good advice. McSweeney's out the door. I think the Prime Minister is now unshackled to make the right decisions. But look, we need to learn from this misstep because that's what it is. And hopefully we'll not have somebody making a bright decision, a bright idea to cancel any other elections between now and the general election. That's the reality of where we are.
Do you think you could handle many more missteps?
Well, look, I've got to be honest with you. I think there have been big mistakes in recent days. And I mean, the reality is there was more mistakes before McSweeney was exited Downing Street. I hope the Prime Minister looks at policy more carefully. I hope he listens to Labour MPs better than he has been in recent months. And I think we can make a strong argument that we win the general election with Keir Starmer as the leader. But if things carry on in the way that they are going, I'm afraid to tell you, there's many Labour MPs who are absolutely sick to death of what's been going on.
What do you think his chances are, therefore, of surviving beyond May? I asked what another MP, not a usual critic, I should say, you're not necessarily one of the usual critics, who gave him a 50% chance of surviving past May. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think it's stronger than that, but I think part of the problem is there's nobody to take the reins. That's the truth of the matter. West Streeting was apparently manoeuvring, according to the leaks from Max Sweeney, in order to position himself to get ahead of the game for a challenge on Keir Starmer. I don't know whether that was true or not. That's what Max Sweeney was allegedly briefing. He's now has problems as a result of the relationship they had with Mandelson. I don't think that's fair, actually. I think we've all had relationships with Mandelson, one way or the other. He's got an association with Hull. I've spoken with Mandelson on occasion. I've spent time with him, never socially, I have to say, but I've spent time with him. I don't think people should suffer for that. But there are other people who are favoured amongst the backbench MPs who've also got problems as well. So Keir's safe, I think. I think he is. But I think any more mistakes, and we're going to be looking a bit closer at finding a replacement than we need to be.
So it sounds like you're saying that you don't have anyone in particular in mind, and that's why you want to stick with Keir?
Well, I'd be sticking with the Prime Minister regardless. I think it's balmy to have this scenario that the Tories went through of swapping and changing leaders every 15 minutes. I think the electorate can't stand it. I think Keir Starmer needs to stick to policy. He needs to stop messing around. He needs to consult the Labour backbenches more than he has been doing. This stuff with this Labour Together shenanigans could have easily been avoided. John McDonnell was emailing the General Secretary of the Labour Party and copying Keir Starmer in, according to John McDonnell, saying, can you look at this, please, before it becomes a problem? Ignored, 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 ignored. Me, on jury trials, I happen to know that it'll go down like a bucket of vomit in the country. It's not going to be popular to do away with some jury trials in serious criminal proceedings. It's manna from heaven again for the likes of Farage. But they don't listen until it's too late. They need to open their ears and listen good.
So you bring up the story that you have come on to talk about, which is this Labour Together row. Do you think the Prime Minister has now said that there is going to be a Cabinet Office inquiry? Is that enough, do you think?
Well, I've got an idea for the Prime Minister. What he should do is thank Sir Brian Leveson very much for his hard work in considering doing away with jury trials. Say thank you, but no thank you, because it's a bad idea politically, very much. It won't work anyway. And I think he should retain the services.
Labour Together row here.
I think he should retain the service of Sir Brian Leveson to investigate an inquiry into this Labour Together shenanigans. I don't think, frankly, the Cabinet Office should be investigating Cabinet Office ministers. Farage will say, rightly, probably, this is the government marking its own homework. It's like when Max Sweeney was investigating Max Sweeney. What a load of nonsense. Come on now. We was in the election in 2024 saying all of this nonsense, all of this chaos, all of this incompetence is going to stop. What on earth are we doing? Come on, please.
Do you think Josh Simons's position is tenable?
I don't know him. Actually, I don't know Josh from Adam. He's a Labour MP. I'm sure he's a good comrade and good colleague in the Parliamentary Labour Party. There's a fair few people in there I don't know. I'm sure he's committed to the job. Probably it's unfair on him as well. But these allegations have been made and the allegations must be proven. They're not at the moment. It's just allegation and speculation. But if the allegations are true, I think it's fairly despicable, isn't it? That the Labour Party or an association, which isn't affiliated to us, by the way, but an association with senior Labour people within it, is investigating journalists for being shock horror journalists. I don't always like what journalists say, but I tell you what, I die for the right for them to say what they need to say. That's democracy.
So you're basically calling on the PM to do more right now?
The Prime Minister to have a proper investigation, which is beyond the Cabinet Secretary. investigating what is essentially a minister of that department. That's what I want, because I think Farage will say this is the government marking its own homework. It ain't going to wash. The general public are not going to approve of it. That's the truth. I think these people with big brains in number 10 Downing Street, frankly, who give really good advice, apparently, which I suspect is not very good advice, and the Prime Minister's been too over-reliant on it, are actually not very good at the politics. That's the problem. They don't knock on doors. They don't do what the activists do. They don't go in the local boozer like me and other Labour MPs and see the public and hear what the public are saying to them. People are despising of the stuff that's been happening recently, and they needn't be, because we're doing some good stuff. But we can't talk about the good stuff because all of this shenanigans keeps coming up.
Karl Turner, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on the Politics Hub this evening. Karl Turner, the Labour MP for Hull East.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the big political story of the day now, shall we? The government reversing its decision to postpone some local council elections in England this May after a legal challenge by Reform UK. Well, we just heard Karl Turner there talking about the threat of Reform UK. I'm now joined, I'm pleased to say, by their head of policy, Zia Yusuf. Thanks so much for talking to us this evening. I suppose when you think about it, reform, the clue's in the name, that it's about reforming, it's about making bold decisions. The government say that this is about changing the way that councils work. Is that not something that about saving money in the longer term? Is that not something you would back?
Well, look, this is a historic day, actually, for this country, and it's all credit to Nigel and to the party, to our lawyers, and actually everybody in this country who stood up and said, this is unacceptable. It is unacceptable to deny democracy to millions of people. And I'll say this too, it is unprecedented in the history of this country for elections to be delayed, postponed, cancelled, whatever the word you want to use, for 2 successive years without primary legislation, meaning without a vote in the House of Commons from MPs who are accountable to their electorate. And by the way, today was the deadline. We were waiting, we were looking at our inboxes to check whether we were going to receive the defence from the government. Today was the deadline they were supposed to submit it. The High Court hearing was meant to begin in 3 days' time. That is why the government's lawyers today have published this letter saying that they're throwing in the towel. They are waving the white flag. They're abandoning their plans to cancel elections for millions of people in this country. And one really interesting line in that letter I want to draw your viewers' attention to is that it said that it was in light of, quote, new legal advice. And the government has preserved its position of privilege with regard to that advice, meaning it will not disclose it. I would like to extend pressure on the government in the public interest to share that legal advice. I'll tell you what I think it would say. I think it was going to say that the government was going to lose this case and be dragged kicking and screaming into these local elections. So what's the result of all of this? It means that the great sacrosanct value of democracy has been preserved in this country for at least another year under this Starmer regime, and millions of British people who have been robbed of their vote will now get their vote in May.
OK, we should say we don't know what that government's legal advice says. As you say, you want them to release it. Do you think the government look like they're going to have to pay your legal costs? Can I just ask you how much you think that will run to?
Well, our lawyers work incredibly hard. They've worked through the night, many nights, actually, and huge credit to them. We'll have to see what that number is. But, you know, while I accept your point that we don't know quite literally what was in that legal advice, I think it's quite clear, though. Anyone who's been in legal situations before will know if one side sends a letter saying we're conceding all of it, we don't want it to go to the hearing, we're accepting our opponent's case and we're willing to pay their costs, I think that is quite telling. The government here is a busted flush. And, you know, as your guest previously just said, this is an awful, awful look, quite rightly, for the Prime Minister, because this is a man who, you know, his approval ratings are sub-zero in this country. He is literally the most unpopular Prime Minister on record. There's never been a Prime Minister polling worse than him. And he's actually colluded. I want to make the point, too, that a number of Tory-controlled councils have also submitted letters to the government, obviously saying, yes, we would like to cancel elections. And no matter how unpopular you are, no matter what excuses around reorganisation or whatever else may be the case, cancelling elections for millions of people is unacceptable. Cancelling them 2 years in a row totally unacceptable. And that's not just my view, remember. It was the Electoral Commission making, I can't remember the last time I saw a statement like this from the Electoral Commission saying they saw no reason for these elections to be cancelled. The reason they were being cancelled is because Labour is going to do appallingly in these elections. Let's see what happens. At the very least now, as I said, we have preserved democracy in this great country for another year.
OK, well, it's also about what you actually do when you have the power. And there is quite a lot of evidence now that in the councils where Reform do have power, things have not been straightforward. Look, in Worcestershire, you've asked to increase council tax by the maximum 9%. That's not the only council where you've done that. In Kent, Reform councillors admitted they failed to get the savings they wanted from Doge, that flagship efficiency review. In Worcester, the council leader has had to deny she's lost control of the county's finances. I mean, you know... Are you actually, has governing been as straightforward as you thought it would be? Are you fit to be in those jobs?
Well, let's go through those. So that one instance where council tax had to go up 9%, no one's happy about that at all, not least the Reform politicians. But the Tories were in control of that council for 20 years, racked up £600 million in debt and a £50 million deficit. And as much as we'd love to have ameliorated all of that in a single year, it's just not possible. So that was the first point. The second point with regards to Kent, that's simply not true. Kent County Council has been exceptionally run and they have saved tens of millions of pounds already. Those savings are identifiable and we have published that already. So look, governing is never straightforward. Reform has been delivering. Reform has been delivering on significant.
Sorry, can I just ask a question on the Doge? I mean, do you actually think that has been working as efficient? Has that actually been working as you wanted it to? Those efficiency savings.
Yes, it has. And the evidence of that is that Reform has published, actually, it's well over £100 million now in terms of the savings that have been made. And actually, the Reform councils, and this is a fact, Reform councils, to the degree council tax is going up in those councils, it is going up less than the combined councils of every single other party. Everybody watching this programme understands that local councils are catastrophically underfunded relative to the enormous statutory demands on their budgets. 70% of council budgets, 70% of council budgets are statutory demands, which are all about Westminster, who's in government in Westminster, where they are forced to spend enormous amounts on social care in particular, which they have no say over. But as a result of the enormous savings Reform councils have made, most of our councils are putting up council tax in line with inflation.
Your council leaflet said you would cut tax. That's not what you're doing. Your council tax is going up.
No, that's not true. No, that's true. I was literally chairman of the party at the time, so I know what was going out on the leaflets that went out ahead of the May elections. We did not promise to cut council tax. And look, as I said, councils are catastrophically underfunded relative to the enormous demands that are placed on them by central government without providing them sufficient funds. I'll make this last point too, that when central government is making a determination, literally calculating how much money local councils receive from them for their social care precepts, as it's called, they literally do so on the assumption that councils raise taxes by the maximal amount of 5%. Most Reform councils are raising council tax by less than that and are doing so in line with inflation. So is there a large body of work to be done? And this is what we plan to do as a Reform government, and Westminster has the power to do it, to ensure that councils are funded properly for the statutory spending that is required of them? Yes, but we're very proud of what we've delivered as Reform, and we have delivered in line with what we told the electorate.
And just last question, on the broader point about reforming unitary authorities, that is what the government say they want to do about saving costs. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, I think it's very much on a case-by-case basis. We can spend 2 hours going through every single council making a case for and against, but I'll tell you what, it's never acceptable. It is never acceptable to deny millions of people the right to vote, certainly not acceptable, and it's unprecedented to do that 2 years running. And I want to emphasize to people watching this show that we don't have a written constitution in this country. We don't have that. And so therefore, everything we might take for granted, including the ability to go and vote your politicians out, regardless of the political party, we should not take for granted. And that's why we must resist any attempt by politicians to try to cancel elections for any premise whatsoever.
OK, Zia Yusuf, thank you so much for joining us on the Politics Hub this evening. And that story is sure to feature heavily on our late night programme, The Wrap, tonight from 10 p.m. Here to discuss all today's big stories and the best of tomorrow's paper will be Deputy Political Editor of The Guardian, Jessica Elgott, and journalist and broadcaster Daisy McAndrew. Right, let's bring our duo back in for this evening, shall we? Right. There's a lot. I feel like we've sort of been flip-flopping between the two big stories of the day. I'm not sure if you noticed that. Let's start with you, Polly. What did you think of what Zia had to say there?
I think it's really interesting because Reform are using judicial review as an effective political tactic, as we've been discussing. They've challenged the government. They've said that the government is doing something illegal, and then they've forced them to change their mind. But actually, if you zoom out and think about other issues, Reform have actually talked about judicial review being anti-democratic, because once you're an elected government, you should be able to do what you want. And so when refugee charities or disability charities challenge government welfare reforms and say those are illegal, take them to judicial review, that, you know, that's the legal system preventing government from doing things. Zia Yusuf got close there to implying we should have a written constitution. I'd love a written constitution. I agree that we should have more of these things codified, and that the concept of government breaking the law is possible. Now, Reform have been more in the past on the kind of Trump side, which is if you're elected, you can do what you like, because you can have the kind of tyranny of the majority, that democracy overrides the law. It's actually really positive to hear him making such a strong case for the rule of law. I hope that they will extend that to kind of wider questions around, individual rights.
James, I can see you nodding. We have some agreement, I think.
Actually, there's a really interesting thing. I'm not a spokesman for Reform, but there's an interesting thing going on in Reform. If you read a bit of Danny Kruger, who's now a Reform MP, was a Conservative MP, and even Nigel Farage's speech, I think the week before last, they've talked a lot about strengthening Parliament. I think they would argue, do away with judicial review and quangos, broadly speaking, they might have a place for them. But the powers should be centralised in Parliament, so MPs should be making a decision. I think that any government coming in wanting to go to Parliament every time they make a decision, I would be a little bit sceptical of, because I think it slows things down, if nothing else. But as Polly said, it was interesting because Zia did seem to nudge and say, he nudged on the fact that we want a written constitution, which of course, one of their policies and the Conservative Party policy is to withdraw from the ECHR. That will require some form of Bill of Rights. So maybe that's something they're hedging towards this year.
It then becomes really interesting, because if you've decided that Parliament should decide and be able to override the executive, OK, but then if government tries to do something without referring to Parliament, again, we see this with Trump, who's writing trade policy, which is supposed to be controlled by Congress, and just ignoring Congress, then it's only judicial review that can tell the government off for not referring to Parliament. And so, actually, again, this is just the basic mechanism of the rule of law. And for the last many, many years, we have had more and more people, particularly on the right of politics, saying that the rule of law is getting in the way of democracy. This is them using the rule of law to uphold democracy. And I think it's really interesting kind of intellectually for them.
Let's talk very briefly, if we can, about Labour Together. And we had an interview there with a Labour MP that obviously wasn't very happy at all. It's quite a complicated story, James. What do you make of all this? I mean, it's pretty shocking, isn't it?
The 2 points I would make about it, I mean, I could listen to Karl Turner for the next hour. I mean,
I know, I wish we could have kept him on.
He needs his own show, that's what I'm saying. But I mean, he made some really serious points. I think, one, as Polly was saying, zoom out, whatever you think about some of the individual issues, from a comms perspective and a political perspective, Keir Starmer cannot be seen, whatever you think about the facts, to be skirting process right now. That is catastrophic for him. We heard from Rob Ford earlier. He's one of the most unpopular PM ever. He kind of came in on, I'm a lawyer. He's got to be seen. He's not seen to have followed process with various things that have happened, not least the elections today. So that takes you to the Labour Together issue. Currently, you read it out at the beginning, it's almost confusing. The Cabinet Office are investigating a Cabinet Office minister. Now, I know Josh, I think he's a decent guy from my interactions with him. And we don't know exactly what's gone on because we haven't seen an actual investigation. But it was uncovered, by journalists. But it doesn't look good if you're being investigated by the same department you work for.
Yeah.
I would say that is a kind of an optics problem, as we'd say in Westminster. That's an immediate issue. I don't know what you
agree with that?
I mean, the problem is that the Cabinet Office has the kind of responsibility for propriety and ethics. I think in fact, the civil service is perfectly capable of investigating and reporting back to ministers. The wider question is really what went on here. Labour Together was actually, really critical to Keir Starmer and Morgan McSweeney's project, to drive out Jeremy Corbyn, to kind of reclaim the party for the centre. And so there's such kind of deep loyalty there that the risk is that overrides.
The perception is if they say there's nothing to see, it won't look.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we've got to move on. I know there's so much, we could be here all night, but we will come back to you. Well, earlier, the Prime Minister has pledged to act in months, not years, to protect children on social media platforms amid calls for a ban for under-16s. A consultation on a ban is being launched in March as part of a wider online safety push. The government is also proposing restricting children's access to AI chatbots. Well, let's bring in our science and technology reporter, Nick Carroll, who joins us now from the newsroom. Hi, Nicky. Can you just first run us through exactly what the Prime Minister has been talking about today?
Yeah, so I think we heard some kind of really strong rhetoric from Keir Starmer today about online safety. And he said things like he thinks parents all over the country are concerned about social media, that he's gone to battle with companies like X, and now he's willing to go to battle with all the tech companies. But I think when you kind of push past that rhetoric and look at what this crackdown actually is, it comes down to three main measures. So the first kind of big measure that you want to look at is around AI chatbots. So the government says it's now closing a loophole that meant that AI chatbots in one-on-one conversations weren't necessarily being held to the same standards as social media platforms when it came to the Online Safety Act. And that really came to a head earlier this year when we saw Grok, X's AI, starting to generate deep fake nudes of people online without their consent. And that's illegal imagery, and it was being shared by people in the UK. So the government cracked down on that. And now they say they're going after other AI companies to make sure that their bots can't do the same, to protect children from illegal content. And the second thing that the government's announced today that will be enacted from now is something called Jules Law, which is essentially around the preservation of children's data in really tragic circumstances where children have died. So now, as a result of a kind of tireless campaigning by bereaved parents, when a child dies, the coroner will now inform Ofcom by default. Ofcom will then tell social media companies that they need to preserve that child's data for investigation. And the idea is it could help give parents some more answers in that really kind of tragic part of their lives about how they've got to this point and what their child was looking at online. Now, the third difference, the third change that the government's announced today is around kind of trying to keep up with tech companies. So the consultation that you mentioned that was launched, which was announced last month, when the kind of results of that come in the summer, instead of having to wait for a fairly lengthy process through Parliament, instead now the government will kind of speed up that process. MPs and the Lords will still be given a vote, but there will be kind of fewer debates on it to try and make sure that they can keep up to date with tech as it's changing and protect children much faster than they currently could do.
Mickey, thanks so much for that. That's really helpful to lay that out for us. Very quick thought from both of you on this. Obviously, the government's talked a lot about making it harder better for children online. James, what's your thoughts?
I think it's more complicated than it looks. I say that as someone who both has dealt with some of the issues around tech professionally and also has two young girls. And I asked my oldest what she would do, and she said, "Oh, Dad, I just watch a tutorial and work out how to get around it." So I think a lot of it sounds good and totally understand where the campaigners are coming from, and some of it I think is just going to happen anyway because of the campaign. But it is very, very complex to get right.
I think it's the most important thing is to think about how you design safety for everyone, actually. You know, I used to work on kind of mental health and kind of financial difficulties and the way they were linked. And it's so clear that actually kind of vulnerability, addiction, they're present for, millions and millions of people at all stages of life. We have a particular responsibility to kids, but actually some of the tools for, financial management or kind of screen blocking that are developed for kids are actually used by adults to just help keep on top of this stuff. It's much more important to change all of our defaults than imagine that just a simple quick fix for under 16s really makes the problem go away.
OK, thank you, Polly and James. We'll come back to you in a minute. Still to come on the Politics Hub. We'll be talking Downing Street marriages after Cherie Blair revealed her husband had never bought her flowers.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits still.
We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching The Wrap. Every night of the week, we will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
Just cannot stand.
Stupid thing to do.
He did know what he was doing.
You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal. That doesn't rule out strikes. I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap.
Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
Now, does romance die in Downing Street? That is a question we're asking after Sir Tony Blair's wife, Cherie, there they are, revealed her husband had never bought her flowers. She made the comments in a new Channel 4 documentary, The Tony Blair Story. So we thought we might have a look, if you don't mind, our panel, at some of the famous prime ministerial spouses and what they've said about their partners, because it's not an easy job, right, being a prime minister's spouse. Right, first, I think we've got, who is it? The Browns, is that right? There we go. Now, I seem to remember, I think Gordon Brown was seen as a bit of romantic. I heard that, didn't he used to call up Sarah Brown and quote poetry? I read that somewhere.
Sounds plausible. Yeah. I think they're a great couple. They're very cute.
And she also, I don't know if you remember this, introduced him in before his conference speech, calling him my husband, my love. So lots of romance alive and well for the Browns when they were in Downing Street. Although I have to say, I think sometimes they start quite romantic when they come in, and then towards the end of their time, there's less.
Every marriage.
Right, next up, who have we got next? I think we've got the Camerons. There we go. Now, Samantha Cameron, in her first major TV interview, spoke about Dave as being, she called him Dave, that's not me, messy, funny, and a little bit irritating. And then we can go on to Philip and Theresa May, or husband here. And do you remember the famous interview that they gave together?
No, I don't remember that.
He takes the bins out.
Exactly, because that's a boy job.
Boy job. Yeah.
I watched that live on Sky TV, you'll be pleased to know. Doing we did a little Goggleboxy type watch along. It was great fun. But yeah, that's why I remember. I was perched on a sofa.
Is it good if you are Prime Minister or a Minister? Is it good to wheel out your spouse? Does that make you more easy to relate to?
People try and I think people do it to make them seem more human, right?
Exactly.
I think it's nice, like it can't be your whole political strategy, right? Like being likeable is the cherry on the top. It's nothing more than that.
Would you like to be a political spouse? Are you a political spouse, James? I don't think you are, no.
I'm not a political spouse. Although my
I should have done my homework.
From the Labour is of different politics to me, which mainly, so that's not particularly romantic.
Well, that makes for a fun
It means we just argue
debate.
about a lot of stuff, yeah. That's true.
But do you think it's a tough job?
I think it's a really hard job. I think because you kind of, once you poke your head above, you kind of get criticised come what may. So I think if a spouse doesn't do much, they say, oh, they're not supportive. If they give their opinion on something, they say, well, they're not elected. So I think it's one of those jobs where you almost can't really win. It's really hard to win if you're the spouse.
But I'm sure I remember that Tony Blair proposed to Cherie whilst she was cleaning the toilet.
Is that right?
I remember that from.
I think maybe this is all just about Tony Blair not being very romantic.
And if that's the case, like, don't expect flowers, right? Perfectly fine. Every marriage is different. My husband bought me flowers for Valentine's Day, and I didn't get him anything. So But if your husband proposes when you're cleaning the toilet, you can't expect romance.
Yeah, I think you've got the clue there, haven't you, already?
Right, let's do our final couple, which is the Sunaks. Here we go. Now, you might remember, well, I think they were quite romantic, because she introduced him at the conference speech, you might remember, and he also spoke about, Rishi has often spoke about her being the messy one, while she has reflected on his nerdy nature and their early relationship. But they've always been quite soppy. Yeah, let's get your favourite number 10 couples, can we?
I think they are really cute, actually. Though I remember him saying that sometimes he restacks the dishwasher if she's done it wrong.
And you have fantastic memory for this stuff, yes.
Yeah, I keep no space for the important
things close to home or something.
Well, yes, absolutely. I like them. I also, I mean, not in Downing Street, but Nick Clegg and his wife, Miriam Gonzalez Durantes, were an amazing couple. And she's now kind of active in Spanish politics. She's a phenomenal woman.
What about you? Have you got a favourite?
I don't know. I did. Obviously, I met Rishi a few times. My impression was they were a really strong couple. I think it's probably, isn't it like any kind of couple, like, have the romance that works for you, but the most important thing is that you support each other. And I think the impression I always got from those two is they're very supportive, and Clegg and his wife think,
Yeah, whereas I think Boris and Carrie were a little more chaotic, shall we say. Lots of stories of,
I think even he admitted
parties and wine and strange goings on in the
I think even he admitted to being an absent father at times. But I suppose, after
you've got to
get that time
It's difficult being a politician and being a parent. I think that's even more difficult.
Yeah. Do you think you can you have two politicians together? I'm trying to think that. I'm not sure there are lots of examples of that.
I think you can do, but it is really tough. Ed Balls and Yvette Cooper.
Yeah.
But they're now spending all of their money teaching everyone maths, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, anyway, more on that, I'm sure, at some point. Thank you both so much. Lovely to have you both this evening. That's it from us. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock.